What's up, guys? This is Ray from Apple Valley Astrologer. So today is the 6th of March 2017, and I just posted my weekly horoscope. It's on the Ray Reinhardt's Apple Valley Astrologer YouTube channel. You can check it out in the weekly horoscope folder. As for other things currently going on with the aspects, my whole motive for using astrology was to make it useful, not to tell people what they want to hear. So again, this is your warning too. I'm not going to be telling you something you want to hear. If you're watching this video because you want to understand all the cute shit with Venus and Jupiter, as I'm going to talk about Jupiter as well, then just go ahead and stop watching this now. This is a realistic standpoint, and it's going to be more of a wake-up call kind of intervention thing. At this moment, this is the opportune time to seek couples therapy or counseling, because people are going to be having a lot of issues. I'm not saying everyone will have a lot of issues, because there again, as I said, the infusion between your birth moment and the moment now has its own chemistry, and you could be an exception. But I'm going to gear obviously more to the people that are having complications, because the transits overall, the themes, are going to be emotionally traumatizing and or heartbreaking and sad. And so a good majority of people will feel something along these lines. Some people will be more so, and then some people will be mild. It all depends. And for you to have more of a precise kind of thing, to understand when it'll end for you, what you could possibly do to resolve any kind of divide or division, or distancing in relationships, whether they be platonic or intimate, or if you want to know just the best course of action you should do, have somebody to talk to, you're going to have to schedule a personalized consultation in order to get a good idea of what that is going on. I'm here to help people get through suffering, get through difficult times. I heal Pluto problems, any kind of power struggles, psychological disturbances, pain, that sort of thing. Pain or emotional wounds, either self-inflicted or by other people, that is directly attributed to Pluto problems. Abandonment, fear, anxiety, or some sort of power struggle in general. Okay, since we are going into Aries season soon enough, and we've obviously had some planets in Aries here for a minute, the atmosphere of power struggle or dominance is a factor to take into account. Also, the fact that Venus is in Aries, now it's retrograde, is an issue. So, I'm going to kind of go over some things. Obviously, Venus is in Aries. That's the detriment, meaning that doesn't flow with Venus associations. So that's how you understand it's detrimental. It's detrimental to everything that Venus represents. Love, life, bonds, and relating to other people. Friends, all kinds of relations. It's detrimental. Also, the other facet of Venus is self-esteem, self-worth, acknowledgement of success, that sort of thing. Just in general, the way that you perceive yourself. If you find yourself worthy or worthless, or hopeful or hopeless, or specifically relatedness, love, lust, sociability, charm, intimacy, attraction, and gratification. In the detriment, it has issues in Aries. It exerts the least influences, and it has polarizing themes. Venus in Aries is idealistic, hedonistic, impulsive, and demanding. Challenges are deception and leading people on, pursuing something that you had no intentions of, and failure to love. And then keywords associated with Venus would be social life, love, arts, music, and adultery. So I'm a big fan of psychological projection. So when people start to cope, and or if they listen to music often and they share it, if you kind of want to get an idea, I shouldn't be giving people tips on how to pick up on things when people aren't being clear with communication, but I just can't resist, because I'm kind of in this boat with right now. You notice that somebody's sad and they won't talk, and you want to kind of know what's going on. a lot of times the music in which they share specifically, not just because people project on social media, because that's ridiculously known. If people don't know that, then I don't know what to tell them. But the music that they share will essentially reflect a lot of the psychological disconnect or difficulties that are directly attributed to Venus going on right now. Okay. The fact that Jupiter also it's in Libra, so it'll have a lot of reflecting associations with Venus themes, because that's Libra's planet. But also, it being in Libra as well, that's the masculine side of Venus. So the thoughts of feeling loved and fulfillment and emotional fulfillment and meaning in relationships and stuff is now going to be reflected on as well. Because it's in a T-square with Pluto and Uranus, it's not going to be good nostalgic things for most people, unfortunately. It's going to be all the psychological or intrusive kind of ideations that have then caused this division within relationships. And Uranus will signify that there's some sort of abnormality or eccentric, antisocial, unempathic dynamic going on, specifically with relationships in general. Just a little backstory too. Jupiter was in Virgo last year, right? And Virgo is the detriment of Jupiter. The shadow side of Virgo would be evident in people's mind, which Jupiter representing the house of the mind. That's where all of it starts. So last year, actually, while Jupiter was in Virgo, a lot of the critical, like hypervigilant and critical thoughts and nitpicking and nagging and discontent and basically just tearing people down. Virgos are really good at slicing people with their words. Those ideations, they may not have come out in communication yet, but those ideations were being planted by things that people were observing. And then when Jupiter went into Libra, it's been attempting to try to balance that out. But unfortunately, Jupiter in Libra, as much as it can potentially be benefic, Libra was began to take on the facets of Jupiter while there was already a very unbalanced, and that's an understatement, an unbalanced dynamic with other things going on. So when a Libra comes into a situation unbalanced, nothing necessarily is beneficial at that point from them. Because it's not that it would be something dangerous or confrontational per se, but you won't get any of the benefic associations with Libra. You won't get cooperation. You won't get understanding or objectivity. If they have objectivity, it's going to be with stepping back away from everyone and then dissecting all of the issues that are going on. Because Libra has an issue with objectivity when they're emotionally involved. That's natural. They gloss over details and indiscrepancies and inadequacies when they're emotionally invested. Of course, obviously Jupiter being that T-square with Uranus and Pluto is making this worse. That if that square wasn't going on, that square in opposition wasn't going on, it wouldn't be as bad. But because it is, that's also going to attribute to Black Moon Lilith, and because depending on the dynamic of an individual will depend on if they kind of just isolate themselves and withdraw and just go introverted kind of thing, or if they go more psychotic, which is totally plausible with Lilith and Sagittarius. Okay, so Aries, introspection, moodiness, and rarely shows emotions or has any form of empathy. Those are just Aries characteristics associated with affection. So Venus in Aries went from stationary to retrograde on the 4th. So it was actually 2 days ago now. and that was on Saturn day. It's important to look at the moment that a sign makes some sort of directional change and the aspects that play into it, because that will be a residual theme for that entire cycle. So at this moment, at 4:01 p.m. on Saturday, the 4th of March, Venus was in the 9th house, which is represented by Jupiter, Mercury, the mind, because that's the polarity, and the signs that would be associated would be Sagittarius and Gemini. So essentially, we're going to definitely keep in mind Jupiter is a key factor in this, regardless of the fact that it's already in Libra. So it has that association with Venus already because of what dignity it's in. And with it being present in the Jupiter house is going to intensify the aspects between Jupiter and Venus now. And I think this is why I had this hunch why I didn't want to do Venus video and a Jupiter video separate. Because I had to, if I would have done that, any of my interpretations about Venus or any of my interpretations about Jupiter, though some of them may have been correct because they're obviously overlapping with themes right now, I wouldn't be as accurate as I will be now. So it's also, just as a side note to keep in mind, planets that are in Sagittarius or Gemini are going to be triggers when they're aspecting Venus in particular. So Venus in the 9th house is going to be an internal crisis. So this is going to be your mind and your feelings going at heads with each other. The fact that there's a sextile to the moon, that in that sense is not necessarily going to be good. That's going to fuel or enable the tensions and the indecision that will then manifest or surface as your relationship status and all that. So that is evident also because that sextile to the moon is conjunct the death aspect in the 10th house, meaning that people that you perceive in your life or your reputation, perhaps your relationship status, or the publicizing of some sort of discontentment and stuff. In fact, I would expect, this is just kind of a test, for the next week or so, like on the cover of all those stupid tabloid magazines, it's going to be all about people's breakups. I know it is usually, but it's going to be more so about like celebrities going to psych wards because their ex left them, or some sort of like verbal altercation. People are going to be again talking shit about their relationships or directly to each other on social media. Twitter will probably be very entertaining. Moon sextile to Venus, on the positive side of the spectrum, if you're one of those lucky few out there that's not going to be affected by this, it would be more nostalgic for Venus association, so past relationships, bonding, reminiscing back on the connections you have with people. But for those who have stressful signatures to the Moon or Venus, i.e. squares, oppositions, or conjunctions in their natal chart, so this is where it's important for you to know your birth chart. If you have squares, oppositions, or conjunctions to Venus and or the Moon, you are more than likely going to be feeling the negative repercussions of this association. So if you already know that you have those squares and oppositions, and you essentially are intended on either having closure to see if you should, get an objective perspective, seeing if you should disassociate with whomever, or if you obviously are emotionally invested and committed and you need to work it out, I'm available for any kind of therapeutic consultations. I can do couples or individuals. So I can even do reports for you as well. So you can contact me and just email me at rayreinhartz@gmail.com if you're interested in that. Because this is the opportune time to be proactive, to either, distance yourself from a potentially hazardous or dangerous situation, abusive even, and or this is your key window opportunity to resolve issues and to basically mend anything, in hopes for you to be able to feel connected again. With stressors with Venus and the Moon will cause you to feel overwhelmed by past relations, inadequacy, detachment, a disconnect from people, which can also manifest as a lack of motivation, sadness, or loneliness. When Venus is in Aries, that's usually something that people suffer from, is loneliness or isolation. So on Mars Day, the 7th of March, we're going to have Venus squaring the Moon. So that's going to be, essentially, Venus is supposed to represent more of your wants and desires, and your Moon represents your needs and your fulfillment. So this is going to be a crucial aspect at that moment. Specifically because it is on Mars Day and Venus is going to be in Aries. It's going to basically look at it and say, do what I want take precedence over what I need? And do I have what I need? And if I don't have what I need, what do I need? And what should I do to essentially get what I need? So the fact that it is on Mars Day, and Mars Day is known for conflicts, combativeness, altercations, disturbances, disagreements and stuff. This might be the catalyst that says that I cannot deal with this relationship anymore. I cannot deal with this emotional, baggage anymore, or I can't deal with this thing, specifically ideations, because Jupiter, again, retrograde, has to do with the mind. And then Venus going retrograde in the 9th house just reemphasizes the mind factor. So people's ideations are going to be the direct origin of these unharmonious relations and associations. So that's why it's crucial at this moment to do therapy, because that's essentially the only thing really in your chart, or what's going on, that you can actually alter to improve or improve the situation or diminish negative repercussions, would be to do talk therapy and think it out. And I wrote down some things. Emotional difficulties due to the inability to express emotions and true affections. That will be the key source of frustration. Predisposition for moody or borderline or histrionic tendencies. So I'm not saying that you're going to turn histrionic or borderline personality disorder. But if I could go over it, but I'm not going to extend this because I'm going to make this a long video if I try to incorporate psychology into this as well. You can just Google borderline or histrionic characteristics, and that'll be a lot of what a certain person will be reflecting in their behavior when they are having some sort of psychological disturbances, aka there's ideations that are at war with their prior commitments or associations with Venus. When Mercury is still in Pisces, it will not take this well. Obviously, Mercury in Pisces is more emotionally based. That's why it's the detriment in Mercury. So it won't take this well. So the ideations, maybe imagined or delusional thoughts, can feed into depressive states. I'm not saying you're going to get depression, but this is not going to necessarily be a happy time per se for people. Reflection of one's intimate relationships, whether nostalgic for good times or dwelling despair for bad times. So again, if you're that happy exception that isn't feeling this, like everybody who was sad on Valentine's Day about not having a Valentine, you're gonna love right now. This is your Valentine's Day for you. I'm being the devil's advocate. I'm trying to be supportive and objective and thorough with everybody involved. So obviously if you're single, then I don't want to leave you out. Which, in fact, you may find yourself you may find that you actually determine what you need. So on the single side of the spectrum, you may be watching specifically all the stuff going around, and realizing like, oh dude, I'm so glad I don't have a girlfriend or a boyfriend like my friend blah 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 because of this and that and this and that. Being grateful for you deciding to, be independent and be by yourself. Embody the Aries kind of persona is going to be very beneficial to you right now. Okay. The 8th and the 9th of March, we're going to have an opposition between Venus and the death aspect. So it's going to feel like you're the death or the end of your associations with Venus in your life. Relatedness, love, sociability, intimacy, gratification, social life. So on the 8th, we're going to be having a sextile to Pluto, a conjunction with Neptune, a conjunction with Chiron, and a conjunction with the Sun for Mercury. That will be thoughts of heartache, thoughts of pain, betrayal, heartache from past relations, i.e., you could dwell on past relations, or if there's been some sort of discrepancies, issues, conflicts, or disagreements to the point where it could cause somebody to just call quits, is now going to be at the forefront of somebody's ideations. They're going to be seriously weighing options, and it could manifest as combative, confrontational, physically abusive, or people just acting rash. So March 15th, we're going to have Mercury trining Lilith in Sagittarius. And it's going Black Moon Lilith in Sagittarius is going to be conjunct Pallas at this point. Pallas is essentially the daughter of Jupiter. So now we have another facet of Jupiter coming into the mix. That's not necessarily good. Focused on injustice, conflict, and triggering defensive dialogue. So verbal altercations and combativeness are going to be a theme. And that's on Mercury Day. So that's going to be a huge influence. So there's going to be two kinds of responses in general to this aspect formation going on. You're going to either have the person who is more the submissive, introverted type, that's going to withdraw and disassociate with anything that is the source of this mental tension that's now causing them some sort of pain or reflection. Or you're going to have the assertive, domineering, control of possessive kind of types, or the aggressive ones, that are now going to try to corner said person and let them have it and tell them everything they've been doing wrong. So it is going to be a cat and mouse game during this time. Some people, unfortunately, will either be two reclusive ones will be together and they'll just completely go their separate ways and stop talking to each other. Two combative or domineering ones could be together and they will go at heads with each other, and there will be probably massive amounts of violence. And again, that would still associate with people in the home. So domestic partnerships and spouses and boyfriend, girlfriend, stuff like that. The violence would likely go on in the home. Mind that Venus will be trine Black Moon Lilith from the 17th of March till the 3rd of April. That's going to be intense. So she's going to be, just as she enabled the division between the nodes of self and others, she's now going to fuel the Aryan Venus associations of lack of empathy, inability to compromise, and understanding or emotional support. She's going to encourage said person that's, obviously reflecting with negative associations with this, to continue feeding into the negativity and or to disassociate with them, and or, if they're impulsive, to get revenge. The 3rd of April, beware, Venus will be squaring the death aspect conjunct Saturn, trining Uranus. And also the death aspect will be squaring Chiron. That's going to be a traumatic breakup day. Okay? So when I said that Lilith will be, trining Venus from the 17th of March till the 3rd of April, if the people who have animosity towards each other are still actually physically together, and it's not working, like you guys haven't been able to resolve anything at that moment, there's likely going to be breakups happening then, and that's also with the death aspect involved, and it being conjunct Saturn, which is your lifespan. That is a death signature, literally a death signature. So that's something to keep it in mind. I did mention before in my video about the eclipses and homicides and suicides, because of this theme going on, that to separate yourself before it's too late. April is too late. Aries season, it will be evidently too late. And I've been highlighting that also, saying that conflicts will arise once we get in Aries season, because that's typical. People should know that. We have Venus squaring Saturn, essentially, on the 3rd of April. So there'll be fears of rejection, lack of harmony, inhibited feelings, withdrawing, or cautious behavior will lead to isolation and loneliness. So if it doesn't turn out to be like confrontational, combative, and say like the case with the two recluse kind of people, they're going to basically just start distancing themselves permanently from this. And I'm having hardcore deja vu because Saturn will actually go retrograde around this time, and I'm going through my Saturn return, and my Saturn in my natal chart is in Sagittarius, which is the Saturn that's playing out right now. I am, personally for me, I am essentially reliving last year right now. And I don't know if that's necessarily going to be similar for everybody else. Might be for people who have Saturn in Sagittarius natally. But I'm having really hardcore deja vu, and despite the fact that I knew exactly what happened last year, because obviously it's done, right? And I knew what happened, and I knew that a lot of it was, yes, my behavior. The psychological personality conflict, or kind of, stressful stressors, is inhibiting me to be able to fix it anyway. I need to clone myself so I can be my own therapist. I don't know. And then Saturn goes retrograde that day on the 7th of April. So I only keep that in mind because there was some significant, squares to Saturn. Saturn also having any aspects to anything essentially inhibits it in some way, shape, or form. The end of March into the first two weeks of April, a lot of associations with how people have hurt you emotionally, or abandoned you, or you feel rejected, or a lack of acceptance, is going to be the prominent theme. Then on 5/10 through 5/27/17, obviously Venus is going to be direct by now. But the issue that you will still have around this time is that Jupiter retrograde, that's in Libra, will still have its ties and associations to Venus. Opposition with Venus and Aries, and conjunct Pallas, which represents injustice, and essentially when Jupiter's highlighted kind of themes that aren't necessarily that benefic come into play. Jupiter doesn't want to necessarily admit that, so the dissociative cognitive dissonance that comes with that, the denial, is manifested through Pallas. So the lack of equality and fairness and support will be emphasized here. As Jupiter still continues to be retrograde, it's going to be internalized again, and somebody's going to decide if it's really worth it or not. And depending on how unstable people have been with the mutable years and stuff, that's what is triggering suicides also. People have nothing going for them the way that they wanted, and or it wasn't how they had it. Uranus conjunct Venus with this opposition with Jupiter. And it's going to cause an unreliable romantic partner, meaning that people are going to just bail. It's evident. Or they're just going to completely shut down and be... it would no longer be a team effort at that point. It's going to be a one-way street in that relationship until it completely deteriorates. Halfway through this opposition with Jupiter and Venus, Venus will then start squaring Pluto on the 21st of May till the 30th, which will inhibit emotions by psychological difficulties or through the psyche. So mentally holding your empathy back, or being unwilling, because Pluto represents Scorpio, and that's a fixed sign. Being unwilling to expose vulnerabilities or to just express empathy at all. Jupiter will go direct on the 11th of June. And at that moment when it goes direct, there will be Jupiter sextiling Black Moon Lilith in opposition Eris. So there's a couple things to be aware of with that. There also will be a trine with Jupiter to Mercury conjunct the Sun, which will give the ability to step back and be objective and act objectively, to disassociate with others, relationships that don't support you mentally. And that's emphasized by Ceres also being conjunct with the Sun and Mercury in that moment. So the Sun representing self, the Mercury representing your mind and your mental processes, and Ceres will be in an air sign, which will be to the way that you will heal will be to relate with other people and or to be heard or understood. So you're going to feel, you're going to be enabled and feel the strength to pull away from relationships that are, being emotionally or psychologically combative, conflicting, or abusive with you. And I'm not saying that that means that people are going to be abusive, but some people just aren't good for other people, and that's essentially what that's going to do. So at the end of all of this, if you act in a sane, calm manner, and you act like an adult, and you do everything you possibly can to try to resolve it, even if, say, hey, you go to therapy and everything, by the time we're into Gemini season, the split of the Gemini persona will give you the chance to, should I go with them or should I just go my own way? And that's the positive manifestation of the Gemini archetype in this sense. You're going to be able to be objective and to detach yourself. So it shouldn't be necessarily as painful per se. But also another thing too, if you somehow make it through all this without a blow up or without a breakup and nobody has acknowledged anything, around that time in Gemini season is notorious for adultery. And Venus being in Aries is associated with adultery as well. So a very unhappy partner, you could not even know anything that's going on per se, depending on how observant you are and how close you guys are. And the wake up call is going to be finding them cheating on you. Yeah. Okay, I'm done. And I just I know this is really depressing, and I'm totally there with you because I'm feeling this too. But I feel good about this because I covered everything. I know it's almost an hour, but yeah. But I also, that Eris in my 11th house just loves proving that the stereotypes are wrong. So I just sat there and made an entire hour video about the realistic negative repercussions of the benefic fucking planets in astrology. Because I try to overemphasize that there is no black and white with stuff like that. I know very well. Because I have a problem staying in the black and white, but I dart so intensely from black to white that I'm conscious that there's a gray area. So I try to project my inability to be balanced and go for the moderation in gray by pointing out when people fail to do that also. I love that's how I use my projection constructively, just like you should. But anyway, if anybody's still interested in a consultation or a chart, charts are cheaper. You want a report. I even will, do some follow-up questions after you read it online. Obviously, the charts themselves are cheaper than the consultations. So, if people want to do any kind of couples consultations, I'll do a deal on that. But you can just email me, rayreinhartz@gmail.com. Contact me any other way you want, as long as you're. And don't be afraid to be persistent with me. And I shouldn't have to encourage that. It's Aries. It's almost Aries season. But yeah. So.
Is there someone there who cares? one there